This is the Thrustmaster H.E.A.R.T controller. It comes in this box right here. This is an Xbox controller, but it will also work on Windows. USB-A to USB-C cable, about 6 feet long. And here's the controller itself. In terms of the build quality, this controller just feels cheap in comparison to their eSwap controllers. I've got the eSwap X2 here. Look at this, it's built like a tank. I've also got the X Pro, the original eSwap for the PlayStation, and I also have the S here as well. As you can see, I'm a pretty big fan of Thrustmaster. Their controllers are usually built pretty well, and I really don't know what the heck happened with this guy. When you first pick this up, you'll notice that this thing is super light and hollow. Listen to this. It's like there's nothing inside. The material that they use in this controller just screams cheap material. And I get it, this is supposed to be their budget controller, right? But if this is gonna be a budget controller, why is this thing $99? And typically, I don't talk about pricing in my videos, but in this case, if you're gonna charge $99 for a budget controller, you've gotta compare yourself to other controllers at the same price point. On here, you get the Hall Effect sticks and 2 back buttons. And check this out, if you get the tournament edition of the Wolverine V3, it's also 99 bucks. And with this guy, you get 4 back buttons and then 2 additional shoulder buttons. You get trigger stops here, and guess what? This guy also have Hall Effect sticks and my switches. And look at this, even the cable is longer, it's 10 feet instead of 6 feet. So you're getting so much more for 99 bucks here versus the H.E.A.R.T controller. For $100, this thing is severely lacking in terms of features and build quality compared to the competition. But if it performs well, I can look the other way. But I'm sad to tell ya, this thing is terrible. Just horrific for fighting games. Let me show you what I mean. Let's jump right into the D-pad. When I first unboxed this, I thought the D-pad feels really good. It's got a nice tactile feel to it. However, as soon as I get into a match, I discover this. Whenever I do a move that requires me to press down, like this move right here, more often than not, he would do that move right there. On the first move, he does down, and then the punch came out, so it executed the down punch. Right after that, down forward gets activated. And oftentimes, if you don't click punch quick enough, this down forward is gonna get activated and you're gonna do a down forward punch instead of a down punch. And this happens so many times, it's infuriating. So check this out, I'm gonna just try to do down punch, okay? And watch my finger to see if I purposely press forward or not, okay? My thumb is gonna be just placed on down. You see that? Every single time, down forward gets activated. And this happens because the D-pad is so loose. Look at how loose this thing is. This is the same problem I have with the Gen 1 DualSense. Look how loose the D-pad is. What happens when the D-pad is so loose? When you press a direction at an angle, this is going to activate the adjacent direction, resulting in a diagonal activating when you don't want it. And really, my worst fear about this controller came true. The D-pad is terrible on this, and now you're stuck with this D-pad. Now if you have something like this, and this is a bad D-pad, and by the way, this is not a bad D-pad. This D-pad on here is great. But let's say if it was bad, just take it out and switch it to this guy. Bam, problem solved. The main selling point for this controller are the sticks, right? These have Hall effects, and that's cool. It's nothing special. It's nothing worth naming your whole controller over. These have a good amount of tension on them. They're not as loose as the Xbox sticks, but when you rotate it, it feels very rubbery. It doesn't feel smooth. And these sticks are really tall too, so they're not great for fighting games. The face buttons are good. They're flat, so that your fingers won't slip off them. However, these buttons are kind of small. In fact, this whole controller is very small compared to the eSwap controllers. You see the size difference there? They do feel good though, very tactile and clicky. They don't have a lot of travel. You can play claw pretty easily here. Press multiple buttons at once. The shoulder buttons are nice. You can click it on the outside or the inside. The triggers are fine. Now, they don't go all the way in, but that's not an issue for me. I know somebody in my comments have mentioned this. This guy has more tension to it than your typical Xbox controller. Aside from the Hall effect sticks, the best part of this controller is probably the back buttons. It's long and it's kind of curved up a little bit, so it's easier to press. This is a lot better than this design right here. Look at how tiny these buttons are. If you're gonna make back buttons, do it like this. Put them on the handles. This way they can be easily accessible. There we go, it's not hard, right? Even though these guys are better, they're still kind of in the middle on the back here, so it's not ideal. I could do my backdash with them pretty easily. In terms of motion input, this D-pad is a lot better. And that's the thing, right? When you have loose D-pads, it's just gonna make it easier to do motion inputs. But if the D-pad is too loose, you're gonna sacrifice the accuracy of diagonals. I can do all of my motions on here pretty easily. In 2D games, diagonals are less of an issue. However, if you play a character like Lily here in Street Fighter 6, she's gonna have this move right here. That's gonna be down hard punch, and then also down forward hard punch, right? And with this controller, you don't know which move is gonna come out, right? Sometimes you get that, sometimes you get that. You see that? It's just random. For 360 motions, I recommend just using the thumbstick here instead of the D-pad. Sliding motions. Even though motion inputs are better on this D-pad, as a whole though, this D-pad is really not good for fighting games. You can program these back buttons using this app right here, Thrustmaster X. However, look at this. It says that the controller is not detected when clearly the controller is on and connected, right? So I gotta unplug this guy, plug it back in. Okay, now it recognizes it. It's just kind of buggy. Just the whole experience about this controller, it's just subpar. You get two profiles here. You can remap the buttons one at a time. For the sticks, you can adjust the sensitivity here and the dead zone. Same thing for the triggers. And you wouldn't know it because this controller is so light, but this thing actually has rumble. It's like a buzzing noise. You can update the firmware as well by clicking on this gears icon. I'm currently on the latest firmware. Alright, let's get to the polling rate test. For minimum input delay, you get about 3 milliseconds. Maximum's about 12 milliseconds. On average, we get about 7.23, and the polling rate is 138 Hz. In terms of polling rate, this is one of the slower ones. It's not terribly slow, but it's not the fastest. Typically, you want the polling rate to hover around 250 Hz. And with the jitter, it's alright. Typically, you want the jitter to be under 1 millisecond. Alright, final thoughts. And this is gonna be quick. Just don't get this controller if you play fighting games. Maybe it's good for other types of games that don't rely on the D-pad. This D-pad is just too loose and inconsistent to play fighting games on it. And when you compare the pricing to the competition, honestly, I feel like this controller right here should cost around $50. This should be half price than what they're charging you. So this is a big old ripoff. And even at $50, I can find better options than this controller. No, seriously. If I were you, I'd spend your money elsewhere. What a big old fail here for Thrustmaster, and I'm a big fan too. Alright, hopefully you found this video to be helpful. If you did, give it a like, subscribe for more, and take care now.